Yeah, because just to say, oh, we can't make a difference, maybe that's true on one level, but it's so defeatist, and it's so depressing to think that we can't affect any kind of positive change in this world. Hi, my name is Claude Jones, and I'm from New Zealand, but I'm also an Australian citizen because I lived there for 20 years. Yeah, so I think my work, if people are attracted to my work, what's been really interesting for me is that people find my work humorous. And it's not necessarily something that I've realised. It's not something that I intentionally put into the work, but I'm quite happy about that. If they find the work humorous, if they find the work, attractive in that it's sort of colourful and playful and childlike, and they're attracted to that kind of aesthetic, or they're attracted to something because they find it humorous. Either way, that's fine. They're attracted to the work, and then when they get to the work, I hope that they'll look at it a bit more closely and consider the sort of strange juxtaposition of different materials, or different head with different body, and then ask questions about it. And that's also, if I'm there, my opportunity to engage in conversation with people about the work. I'd made a couple of pieces previously where I just made something really simple in ceramics, but I really hadn't ever learned how to work with ceramics properly. And so when I went to the Netherlands the first time, which was 2014, I think, yeah, that was a 3-month intensive residency, and that's where I learned how to work with ceramics. And then I got addicted to it. Even though it can be a tricky thing to transport and can be a bit fragile at times, I like working with ceramics in combination with other mediums. I like how the different materials can say different things. I like working with mixed media on paper. And I think that's probably because of my printmaking background, because when I was at art school I started off wanting to do sculpture, but that didn't really work out very well because I had a bit of a conflict with the sculpture teachers. Yeah, they just didn't really treat me very respectfully. So I thought, bugger this, I'm moving to printmaking where the people were really lovely, no one teased me, it was great. And then I got caught in printmaking. So I was printmaking for years, and I even did my undergraduate in printmaking, and that really established my love of paper. And so even though I sometimes do works on canvas, I can't really describe it. I have this real affinity with paper. I love it. Then I do quite a few sketches and work out the composition and work out the colours. And then I also need, because I'm working with collage elements, I need to print those up or find them and work out which collage elements go together. So it's sort of like a design, figuring out the whole design before I approach it. So I grew up in, I think you'd have to call it white middle class suburbia, to be honest. Yeah, in the North Shore of Auckland, New Zealand, in a place called Mairangi Bay. And we lived there with my mum and my father, and we'd just walk up the road and go to school. It was a Catholic primary school. We were very Catholic for a short time, so it was, that influenced me a lot. My mum's super creative and did lots of stuff, but at that point I think she was a housewife looking after the 4 children, and my father was hardly ever around. And then when I was 7 years old, my mum and dad separated. And then she was on her own with 4 kids for a while. And it was sort of in the 70s and 80s, and my mum became quite a feminist. She was feisty and independent, and I think that really influenced all of us, especially that we were sort of mostly a female household. My brother was the youngest, and she taught us all that we should do whatever we wanted to do so long as it made us happy and wasn't hurting anyone else, and to just go for it, that we could do anything we want, like we were capable of doing what we wanted. We didn't have to be housewives, we didn't have to get married and have children. That's influenced my work too, because I'm really privileged. I'm privileged to have grown up in a white middle class family with a liberal feminist mum, and many women around the world don't have that. Yeah, and many women are still really repressed and have really limited opportunities. When I was in Australia, I did a 3-year full-time diploma of fine arts at the National Art School, where I learned a lot of really hands-on techniques, because it was, I think now it's a degree program, but back then it was called a technical college. So that was fantastic. I learned so many technical skills there, and that helped me a lot when later on I went to Sydney College of the Arts to do my Bachelor of Visual Arts. Because I realised when I was doing my Bachelor of Visual Arts, it was a lot more conceptual and theory-based, and it was really good to have those skills already, because there wasn't necessarily as much opportunity to learn how to make things, And then I also did my Master of Visual Arts at Sydney College of the Arts as well. I've also lived in Spain, in Barcelona for 1.5 years. I went there and I did a residency at a place called Can Serrat. So I wanted to practice my Spanish and make artwork. And after that, I met a young Greek man and fell in love. And we decided to move to Barcelona together. We had this little apartment and I felt isolated and things weren't going well. But we had this spare room in the apartment, tiny little room, and I would just go in there and I would just draw. And I did all these really small drawings that were little hybrids, which I'm still doing today actually. So they were hybrid little figures, hybrid animals, thinking about biotechnology and transgenics and things. But they were quite whimsical and fun. And then when I went back to Australia, when it didn't work out, I went back to Australia after 1.5 years. Those works were then accepted into an art prize, and from that art prize I got into a commercial gallery because they really like those little drawings. So there's always something good that comes out of. And my Spanish got better. But my earlier work was much more to do with human relationships. So my earlier work was more printmaking focused, and it was about the complex relationships between people and how people exploited each other and didn't treat each other very well. And I think I was especially addressing the problems with male-female relationships and being a bit cynical about male relationships as well. You know, my refuge, my place to go when I felt stressed or uncomfortable was to go and make artwork. And so I'd always made things. I'd done big oil paintings, I'd been making masks and things, so I thought I'll go to art school. And I went to art school, and then what came out in my art was looking at these human relationships, and a lot of images were men and women in ambiguous situations where they could have either been making love or they could have been having a violent physical confrontation, or they were, you know, or it was two faces arguing with each other, or it was, you know, symbols of being repressed or feeling repressed in relationships. And so that was my earlier work. When I went to Sydney College of the Arts, then I was well and truly over that phase of my life, and that was when I started looking at animals and focusing on how animals were used in different areas in exploitative ways. And I just thought that's just, you know, people think, well, that's wonderful for science because it can save people's lives, and that's great. But on the other hand, it's horrible for the animals that we just think of them as these things that we can use. And so I started really exploring more and more how animals were being exploited. And that led me on my journey, I think, towards eventually becoming vegan as well. I was vegetarian at the time. You know, the reason that I use this sort of naive, childlike imagery is because that when we grow up loving animals, myself especially. I really loved animals. So there are these romantic ideals and fairy tales that I think we all warm to. You grow up loving all of this stuff, and then at a certain point you realise that you're eating, many of us anyway, I didn't grow up vegan or vegetarian. We grow up eating meat. And so then at a certain point you have to ask yourself, where does that come from? Yeah, I want people to question their ethics, question the contradictory ways in which they're treating animals. So yeah, that's my provocation. You know, so my work is aimed at encouraging people to inquire, you know, about those sort of contradictions, and are they okay with that? Because I don't think that we should be okay with that. I don't think that violence towards other innocent creatures, humans included, is ever okay. I just can't really support violence in any way. I do feel a bit frustrated. I feel like we could do a lot more. I mean, even just protesting what's happening in Gaza would be great. I read a headline of an article recently that said, you know, where were you when the Gaza genocide happened? Well, where were you? What were you doing? You know, how will we feel later on? Yeah. Oh God, I feel upset just talking about it. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. But don't you think we could all be doing more? If you're consciously making a choice to boycott Israeli products, and hopefully that spreads, the more we talk about it, the more we talk about ways that we can make a change, the little ways that we might be able to impact change. Yeah, but I think we're so far away from ever stopping to exploit animals if we're treating human beings that badly, you know? Anyway, I try and remain optimistic. And so as I've learnt to be much more relaxed about my veganism and not to expect that other people are going to adopt the same diet or even reduce their impact, reduce the animal products they eat, I've also learnt to be a lot more subtle in the way that I'm addressing that message through my artwork, and I've also then realised if the work is more subtle in its messaging, it's more important for me to have those kind of conversations as we are now. Yeah, I think we can't just give up, can we? It's always important to do whatever little thing we can do to try and improve the world.